on your way here, I was thinking about how did Serj stay so normal? Because you're honestly one of the most down-to-earth,
thank you.
thoughtful.
Not normal, though.
No, but normal in the sense that famous people are often out of touch, to say the least, and I'm sure you've experienced that because you're around so many famous people. But how did you stay so normal? How are you grounded?
I never bought into the bullshit.
How?
I've been in different industries growing up, and by the time that the band started seeing success, I was probably 35 years old. So I was older, compared to my, bandmates and other people in the industry. I wasn't in my 20s. I was in my teens. So I had been in the jewelry industry, the shoe industry. I had owned a software company. I went to university. So for me, this was a very unique industry on the industry side. Now, the creative side is my life. It's my joy. But as an industry, the music industry was a very unique industry in the sense of its kind of overinflatedness of egos, over complementarian kind of, society. And people would come and, compliment the band and myself. And I would be grateful for it, but at the same time feel it's a little superfluous. But I attribute it to the uniqueness of the industry. So I never kind of bought into, like, I'm happy to meet people. I love when people get excited and want to take a picture, and I do it and all that. But I never think it's because of me. I think it's because of the art, the music, and their relation to it, which is more important. And so I don't personalize it.
Was there ever a point where you feel like it affected you in a way that either changed your values or your perspective on life in a way that you're like, wait, I have to pull back?
It hasn't changed my values, I'm happy to say, as far as I know. In terms of my perspective on life, there might have been a moment, I'm thinking, with the band's success that at one point, more than anything, I watched people around me. I'm not talking about necessarily close people, but also other bands, because you tour with a bunch of bands and you see the success and how, I don't want to say it changes people, but people react differently to it. And that by itself turns me off. And so, but I think it's more of an age thing, to be honest, which is what I started with. I was too old to buy the bullshit, so I enjoy having reservations at restaurants that I probably shouldn't be allowed to go to so quickly. But the rest of it is just demeaning. I mean, not demeaning, but, I love that people gravitate toward the music. I don't understand the celebrity. I never have. I've never seen anyone as a celebrity. I've seen people as artists, as authors, as painters, as, many different things. But the celebrity is vapid in terms of its actual depth. There is no depth, right? What does that mean? It's someone who's on camera and people know. Now, that person could be a wrestler, a musician, a hooker. It doesn't matter, right? Like, as far as them being a celebrity, right? So, yeah.
If your kids wanted to get into the industry, would you make them wait until they're older?
That's a good question. I don't know. Because I guess I didn't have a foot in the door. Everything was new to me. I didn't know the industry, and I didn't know other bands even, or whatever. For all of us, it was, we just came in from the left and not knowing what we're doing here and somehow made it through. With my own kids, they would have a leg up, obviously. So, I wouldn't say wait until you're 30, 35 to start playing music. That would be unfair. If it's something that they wanted to do, whether it's music or art or painting or, any of the arts, I would encourage them wholeheartedly if they gravitated toward it. Now, I open opportunities, but I don't force, because I wasn't forced. So there's a piano in the house. You want to play? It's there, but I'm not going to tell you to go sit on it, to play. You want to take lessons? I'll bring you a teacher or sit down with you, which I have. But I'm not going to force you to do it, or make it a class thing, because that's a turnoff as far as I'm concerned with the arts. But if they gravitate toward it, then I'll wholeheartedly support it and do my best to see them succeed in a way that is a career, a lifelong career, rather than, a quick thing.
Even though the fame didn't get to your head, you talked about the pressures that got to you in your memoir, and the anxiety that you experienced because of it. So how would you help them to mitigate the pressures of the industry? It is really hard to detach yourself from that and to stay grounded, especially at a young age. Because as much as people tell you not to take things to heart, to treat certain situations in a way that, to have thicker skin, until you have that maturity with age, there are certain things that in your 20s, it's really hard to really feel that innately.
It's worse in film and acting, where your judge, it's a complete extroverted kind of thing. There's obviously inner talent, but your looks, how you come off is so judged. And it's, I would be more worried for kids going through that field rather than music. Music's a little more forgiving in terms of all of that stuff. But, I think the way I do it, for example, with my own son, because he sees, the other day, someone came up to me and recognized me in some odd place. And my son said something very interesting. He said, a lot of people know you, Dad, and they love you. And I don't think I can ever get used to that. And I said, you shouldn't, because it's not a normal thing. People that don't know you shouldn't just come up and talk to you. It's not a normal thing, I said, you shouldn't get used to it. But I said, pay attention to how I'm treating them, and I want to tell you about what's important about what I do. Because, kids, especially now with social media and stuff, they're so focused on the celebrity aspect, on the numbers, on the look and all of that. And I said, none of that is important at all. Like, what is important is what I do. I'm a musician. I create music. I'm a creator. I'm an artist. I paint, and I said, it's the work that matters. None of this is important. This is nice. It's a bonus, when you have it. But it's not important. What's important is what you do at home. When you create something and you feel good about it, and it changes the world and it changes you within the world. And so I try to instill that, because that's the real message.
Yeah, you said something in your book to the effect of, I never wanted to be one of those vacant souls who speaks to millions but talks to no one.
Yeah.
Have you always been that way? Is it because of the way your childhood shaped you? You escaped a civil war. You've had the stories of your grandparents being survivors of the Armenian Genocide. Do you feel like it just, since childhood, put a different perspective in you?
I don't know if it's different. It's definitely my perspective. But I think a lot of people have a unique perspective of their own, based on where they come from, what they've endured, let alone generational trauma and all of that stuff that you're referring to. So I think, we each have our own kind of place on this planet and our role. And it's good that I got to spew some of it through the book to be able to share.
So why did you decide to write a memoir?
It's actually very funny, because I did not intend to write a memoir. I wanted to write a book about the intersection of justice and spirituality, a philosophy book that I've had in mind for many years. But I got connected to a literary agent out of London, a young man, a very excited young man, who was a fan, and he had read an article in The Guardian that I had written. And he was impressed enough to try to get a hold of me. And he said, I would love to represent you if you consider writing a memoir. And I told him the same thing. I said, I don't know, maybe later in life. I'm still creating, I want to write it at a time where I'm not creating as much or whatever. I said, I want to write this philosophy book. And he kind of made a joke of it. And he was a little cheeky, and he said something like, well, who's going to read that, or something like that. And we both laughed, right? And he said, no, I'm kidding. He said, what I really want to tell you is, why can't you do both at the same time? And that kind of put the thought in my head. And I said, okay, you know what? Before I give you an answer, let me go and write a little. So I went and wrote. I wrote like 10 pages, not much. Within those 10 pages, I realized whatever is philosophy, poetry, thinking was very fluid and beautiful. Whatever was personalized biography was flat and dry. So that became the issue. And so to kind of override that, what I did was basically create this dialogue. In other words, just like you and I are talking question and answer, and I'm just thinking and spewing, it became a conversational book. Mm-hmm. So I would be doing, hundreds of hours of interview, literally transcribed and all printed out, and then start organizing into chapters with help. And then, of course, the editor steps in and they give their sense. Then the legal department steps in and they give their notes. And so, because you have to go through all these different... Then there's the legal department of North America versus UK,
Where would the legal department step in with a memoir?
The legal department would step in if they've... on language that basically bordered, libel, or language that bordered, anything that could be a legal problem, liability. Now, laws are different in different countries, which makes it really interesting. So I have to say that our North American book is in a small way different than our European UK, which is based in the UK book.
Can you say how?
I'll give you one example, and it's a funny example. So I'm going back with the lawyers. The North American lawyer, we went through maybe like 12, 15, maybe 20 max kind of specific incidents that we either reworded. They had suggestions. Instead of this word, if you use this, it's less inflammatory, etc. Fine. Easy stuff. Or if we stuck with something, I said, no, I want to use that word because here's the proof. Here's a link saying that this is the case. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for the backup. There's backup. There's research. In the terms of the UK, it was a lot more... what I always thought, I always thought UK press is so sensational. They must get away with a lot more verbiage in that sense than in the UK. I was completely wrong. It's the opposite. Their laws are weird in a sense that if you make a statement, even if it's backed up by press, like even if it's in the newspapers and it's claimed to be true, someone can sue you for that statement nonetheless. The word oligarch, for example, became a problem in the UK. They didn't want me to use the word oligarch. They didn't want me to call Ilham Aliyev a dictator. Was it dictator or fascist? The word fascist. So I had to prove he was a fascist. And I sent a bunch of articles highlighting how they brainwashed children from kindergarten to hate Armenians, Armenophobia, fascism. Armenians are not allowed to come into the country. I mean, that's fascism, right? Let alone how he treats his own people, which is a whole different thing. So I had to literally prove this to them over weeks of emails back and forth. It was really, really annoying. But my favorite part was they said that I can't use the word porta potty because it's a copywritten word. Whereas in the US, I went into the porta potty, for example, right? And nobody said anything. It was fine. In the UK, they said, well, that's like using Kleenex. You can't use the word Kleenex. You have to say tissue, that kind of thing, right? And so I sent them about 20 emails going, how about we use shit can? How about we use poop box? Like, just on purpose to the lawyers, just because I was so pissed off. That's the only thing I could hang on to. So I sent them 20 emails with multiple shit references because it was pissing me off. But yeah, I mean, it's completely different. It's kind of fucking weird.
Oh,
yeah.
I was wondering why one of the Instagram questions that I got asked, is Serj planning on releasing the book? I think it was in Europe. And I was like, well, why would it be released in the States and not in, like...
Yeah, it's actually released in the UK. It's released in France. There's a French version in France. They're working on a Czech version that's going to be released, if I'm not mistaken. there's a number of different countries that are translating. Armenian version is it's going to be released in Armenia. We've approved that. Brazil. So it's, once the English version comes out, then you get other publishers coming in and wanting to buy rights to that territory, and they do the translations themselves, and then they send it to you and all of that stuff. So those are happening now. So it's spreading in that sense. Yeah.
Have your family members read your memoir?
I've given it to my brother. My mom and dad haven't read it because their English isn't that great. So I'm waiting for the Armenian version to give them.
Yeah.
Yeah. My uncle read it. My cousins have read it. They loved it. And especially my grandfather's story, which they share, obviously.
Which made me cry in bed. I was like sobbing reading the story.
Yeah. I mean, it's all of our ancestors, have gone through that, time. So it was great. And, it's been an incredible experience. It's been somewhat, not just revelatory in terms of my parents' life and grandparents' life, my own youth and stuff, because you have to research. Like, even though it's your memoir and it's your life, there are things you realize that you haven't made the connections. For example, one of the questions that they asked me is, why, when you're writing about your parents, please make sure you describe how they met. And we had never asked my parents how they met, which is weird, right? I mean, I'm in my 50s, my brother's in my 50s. And so so I had to sit down with them and interview my parents and go, so the first time you met, do you guys remember where it was? And they told me the story, and it's in the book. And so, I mean, I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to have, we all lead fast, busy lives. And to be able to actually sit down and do something like that was a pleasure.
But reading about your childhood and all of the different major events that happen in your life, you see that it's so character building, and it gave me such a deeper understanding about who you are, why you do what you do, especially as an activist. Were there things about yourself that you hadn't realized until you started writing the memoir?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of stuff. And one of the things that I always, there's so many I can't even remember right now because I haven't read the book in a while. After reading it 100 times for editing and all of this stuff and making sure every word belongs there and every word is correct. But I think the thing I realized the most is my own culpability in the past, especially having to do with System of a Down, with my own band, my own passivity. Through a time of grief and through a time of loss and through a time of spiritual awakening, I mistook non-aggression, or I should say non-confrontation, for passivity. And so I allowed things to happen and became an active participant in the demise of my own band in that sense. And not that things could have been different, but my passivity is what I regret. Over time, of course, that changed. And I needed to evolve into a solo artist, find success on my own, to come back to the band on my own terms. And it became a different experience altogether for me and them, I'm sure. And a much better one, I think. But that's life, So there's a lot I learned about myself. Not that I hadn't realized some of it, but I don't think you realize the depth of it, until you actually put it on paper. And then you look at things and as you're reading it, you have these feelings and you're like, why am I feeling this right now? I've written this. Why am I feeling this right now? Why am I feeling like I haven't read this before? It's my own words. So it's very interesting. And then doing the audiobook was really interesting as well, because now I'm reading my own book with my own voice and I'm going through these emotions, reliving stuff, which was very interesting, I remember talking to Flea because he did a beautiful book about his life. And he said the audiobook was really tough. He goes, I was getting choked up like so many times. He goes, I was having a hard time getting through it, which, I understand. Not just the emotional aspects of it, but, kind of properly representing the words with a voice,
So what is the status of the band now, as of today?
Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. Yeah, I mean, the status of the band now is we're a band. We have not made a record. We have not put out new music except in 2020 as a vehicle of awareness for our people. When Azerbaijan attacked Artsakh and was doing its ethnic cleansing, we wanted to make sure that, you know, the disinformation that the Azeri bots were, you know, propagating had some type of defense. And our defense were songs. And so we used media, and we used the two songs, both written by Darren, Protect the Land and Genocidal Humanoids, as a way of, you know, raising awareness about these people who have lived on those lands for 2,000 years, and they're being ethnically cleansed because of Stalin's decision in 1920 to give those lands to Azerbaijan. So, you know, besides that, we haven't created anything, released anything new. We play unique, amazing shows every year that we all thoroughly enjoy, and we thoroughly enjoy doing them together. And that is it.
How did the band react to your memoir and all of the personal, because you share a lot of personal and intimate stories and things that happened between you guys? Was it received well, or how did they react?
It was received a lot better than I anticipated. But I do have to say that I was incredibly careful not to offend.
Yeah.
And also took a lot of personal responsibility in every portion of the relationship between each and every one of us. And I said things respectfully. I kept people's own, what's the word I want to use? People's own culpability to their own storytelling. So, you know, I didn't want to portray other people's issues and problems through my book. That's their story to tell. So it was just the way I perceived it with my relationship with them. And I said it respectfully and with love, which is how I talk about my friends, partners, you know. And so it was actually, yeah, I said anything. John praised it. He made a joke. He said if it was my book, I'd be bashing everyone as a joke. He goes, why'd you even write it if you didn't bash anyone as a joke again? So it wasn't a bash.
There's a truth to every joke.
There's a truth to every joke. So, but I look forward to John's book because that sounds very sensational and exciting. But yeah, I mean, it's been good. I can't complain. You know, I think, you know, it's been great in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah. The last interview you and I did together was maybe about close to 5 years ago, probably. And there was such a stark contrast between the interview I did with you and the one I did with John, very much like how he would write the book versus
pretty much. Yeah.
how you wrote the book.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's definitely some truth to that.
Oh, my brother-in-law.
How does that work? If you have, let's say, a disagreement in regards to business or the band or something, and then it's Christmas, you're gonna have dinner together.
It you know, over the years it hasn't been. It's a lot better now. I think we're pretty much on the same page now. Either, you know, he's accepted my, you know, vision for, or lack of vision for things happening, and or I've you know, maybe it's both ways, but it's really great now. Like, you know, I love John. He's like a brother to me. He's my kid's uncle, and we're at their house. They're at our house, you know, every 2-3 days. And, you know, in terms of the band, there's not that much friction having to do with decision making and all of that, which is great. But there was over the years, and it was difficult. It was difficult because I was trying to separate. I tried to do my best to separate work from family in that sense, but sometimes they got involved. Not everyone was able to keep that border, and so it became difficult at times. There were some tough conversations, you know, but I always kept on saying, "Let's not talk about this now. We're sitting around the table. Let's call me later," you know, that kind of thing. Because, you know, everyone has their concerns, everyone has a vision, and not everything can be as you would want or someone else wants, you know. It's tough. But, you know, the political stuff's tough too. I mean, we've, you know, over the years been on different political spectrum in terms of our, belief systems. And that was tough at times too. But again, it's just family,
I think in regards to being on the opposite sides politically, so many families are dealing with that, whether it's US politics, even Armenian politics.
Sure.
It could be one family having completely. But I think that is actually a lot easier to digest when you know that the person in front of you, even if you completely disagree with them, if you know that they really innately want the best, they truly want the best for, when the intentions are good, it's a lot easier to respect each other's opinions and maybe even be flexible with your own. It's what I wish we had more of now, all over the world. Absolutely. Being able to actually hear each other out and understanding, hey, if you don't agree with me, it doesn't make me a bad person.
And vice versa.
And vice versa. But I feel like I have that toward other people. There's so many people I disagree with, and I don't judge them because I understand that their life experiences brought them to what they believe in. And I believe that they truly want what's best. Their intentions are good. But then when they treat you like a bad guy for having a different opinion, it's like, wait. It's much like the 9/11 essay that you wrote. It was so misunderstood because when people are in crisis, they don't want to hear a different perspective. Correct.
But the unfortunate thing is, it feels like now we're always in crisis.
Yeah.
That's the fucked up part. It's like, I grew up in this country and there were always differences of opinion between different political parties, but they were not so extreme.
Mm-hmm.
There was always a handshake across the aisle. There was always agreement, cooperation between Democrats and Republicans generally. I mean, for me, a two-party system is a duopoly. It's not a great idea. It's not a real democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Soviet Politburo had two different sides to it, right? Like it's one body, two sides. They're both corporate parties, let's be honest. And so, I think American democracy is not going to thrive by choosing the right candidate. American democracy is going to thrive with multiplicity, having different parties and different ideas come into the forefront that people care about in the form of different political parties, be they small, independent, or whatever. I think that's very healthy. And maybe even it might benefit from a change. Some people are very constitutional, conservative, or whatever, which is fine by me, but it might benefit from a conversion to a non-presidential type of republic, in terms of like a what do you call it? The parliamentarian system, where you're not voting for a political party, or you are voting for a political party and they choose the candidate, which is what's happening now anyway. If you look at it, that's kind of what's happening now. But there's certain restrictions because of that. I don't know. I'm not trying to diss the American political system. There's some amazing things about it, but when people don't actively recognize the truth of the American political system, especially the money portion of the politics, the corruption, it's very, it's weird because they're not seeing things, I mean, I think they're going to spend $13 billion on this next presidential election. I mean, who's giving them that money and what do they want, right? I remember years ago, I was doing a speech at the American University of Armenia in Yerevan to students, and I basically posed a question to them. Because, at the time, Armenia was known as a corrupt post-Soviet oligarchic country, which it was. And I posed a question for them, and I said, in terms of sheer dollars, what would you say, let's get some hands up in the air, is the most corrupt country in the world? And everyone was like Russia, Belarus, Armenia, like everyone was throwing out a name. It's the American University of Armenia, mind you, And I said, well, it's America. It's the United States of America. There's more money in politics in the United States of America than any country in the world combined. Most countries in the world combined. And that's the truth. The difference is you're not bribing a policeman on the street or a judge. Let's hope not, at least. But the bribes come in terms of huge interest groups, special interest groups, organizational groups, be it Chamber of Commerce, American Medical Association. These organizations they're the kingmakers. They pick the presidential candidate. They pick who's going to win. They fund who's going to win, And so not just that, but foreign interests. Turkey spends millions of dollars, as we know, a year on multiple lobbying, K Street lobbying firms to get their votes in Congress, not just Turkey, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, China, right? So where's the democracy here, right? And how about the electoral system, a slave era system that was created that on paper still exists, versus the popular vote? All of this stuff, if you really look at it and you think about it, you realize that it's a corporate democracy that we're living in. So let's just call it that.
Quick break to thank one of the sponsors of today's episode, MX Motor Lounge and Leasing. I've personally used their services for both leasing and buying a car, and they truly made the whole process seamless. If you're in Los Angeles and looking for a friendly, knowledgeable team to help guide you through your next vehicle purchase, look no further than this award-winning local dealership. Visit MX Motorsports for more information. That's EMEXMOTORS.com.
You're so vocal about your political stance on different issues. What's been the toughest criticism for you to digest? You've been misunderstood, I think, many times with your intentions, but what's been personally tough for you?
I'm so used to being attacked for my opinions. As an American, as an Armenian, as a leftist, within so many realms, that I've kind of, you never get used to it, but you also stop taking it so seriously. I wish I can go back to the 1980s and make sure they didn't cut funding for education in this country. I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, because we would have a different body politic now. And that's what it comes down to. And I hate saying it that way because I'm not calling people uneducated, but what I'm saying is that has a huge effect on the trajectory of multiple voices within a democracy.
And I think for understanding nuance.
Yes.
Because there's a tribalism where people, it's like they treat politics like football teams or something. They're not understanding that there's nuance in all of these issues, and you can't just go all the way left or right on any given issue. Correct.
And I agree with that. And I don't agree with either party in terms of the U.S. political system 100%. I think they're both gone extreme in some ways, in their own ways. Now I'll still pick one candidate over other based on logic, I guess, or reasonableness. But I haven't seen a great candidate for office in terms of the last stage. Not in terms of the primaries, but in terms of the final stages in most of my life in this country, which is sad. But to answer your question properly, I would say the most hurtful thing were my own people, attacking me. And that's happened. Armenians attacking me for, my support of the revolution in 2018, which, by the way, we all supported. And for not criticizing the government as much as they would have liked me to, the Armenian government, that kind of stuff. That was very painful,
Can we take a pause there?
Yeah.
Because that's another thing that frustrates me. Supporting the revolution isn't supporting a person. And I think the two are conflated very often. It was about ridding the country of corruption. And I was in Armenia when the revolution happened. And I've never seen people happier in the streets because it was a life and an idea. It was an ideology that they were fighting for, not a person.
Yeah.
Most people didn't even really know much about the leader of the revolution at the time. So it was about the ideas and the life that it represented in the future. And then it took a completely different turn.
It was about justice.
Yeah.
It was about getting out of a system where the courts didn't represent people equally. Whoever had money had the say. You know, cops were paid off. It was an unfair system. People weren't paying their fair share of taxes if they had the money to bribe. It was a typical post-Soviet oligarchic system. And people were incredibly... The word I remember is elated. They weren't happy. They were elated.
Yeah.
That's a unique word. And I had never seen that. And I've seen crowds of 100,000 people partying in front of System of a Down, very happy, very excited. But that level of elatedness I had never seen until Armenia in 2018 during the revolution. I agree with you. It was a unique thing. And unfortunately, it was lost. That high was lost because of Azerbaijan's attacks and our lack of military preparedness and the crumbling military infrastructure due to corruption for many, many years, right? So, you know, all of our faults were basically displayed. A lot of people don't do geopolitics, but if you really, really look at it, it had Russia's throwing Armenians under the bus was its own geopolitical interest to align itself with Azerbaijan and Turkey, you know, as it was going to invade Ukraine. If you look at it in a strict, unemotional geopolitical perspective, you realize that Russia was going to jump ship anyway for Armenia because they had bigger concerns of their own with Europe, Ukraine, and they had a plan, and we weren't in that plan, you know? So they fucked us. And no matter how you look at it, and the Armenian people know this, even the people that are very much close to the, you know, Russian elite and, you know, of the political, they're not speaking out loud anymore because they can't even defend the actions of Russia having to do with Armenia and our losses, right? So in terms of the long term, I think our Western pivot wasn't even our choice, right? It was our only choice. It was like they closed all the roads. There's one road open and you have to move forward. I have a lot of hope in what Armenia is going to become. Now, in terms of the mistakes made by the current government, I would say that due to their own perceived weakness, them not standing up for the people of Artsakh, I don't mean in terms of war, but in terms of even after September 27 of last year, in terms of human rights violations, in terms of international courts, I think that's a major mistake. I think that is horrible. I think that should be reversed. You know, you can't make peace with a dictator who has done ethnic cleansing and you're afraid to go to the ICC against them. That's fucking bullshit, right? So that is the worst mistake they've made. I also think dealing directly between Armenia and Azerbaijan, direct negotiations is a mistake, even though that's what they're propagating, that's what they want to do, because I don't think they have the clout on an international stage to deal directly with Azerbaijan. They need Western intervention, Western support, I should say, not intervention. And the West is giving that support. So I think they should take it. So as far as the larger mistakes, I think these are the larger mistakes. I don't want to say mistakes, but policy decisions that I criticize the government for. But I think in terms of the general outlook, in terms of, you know, getting rid of corruption over the long term, Western pivot, growing the economy, all of these were absolute necessities for the growth of Armenia and our future. If these things didn't happen and we stayed under the Russian, you know, regional hegemony, we were screwed. So in the long term, I see definite strong benefit for Armenia having this government, and irrespective of my criticism of their horrible way of dealing with the Artsakh situation. I think they have more. I think they need to realize they have more clout in terms of the international justice having to do with Artsakh than they think. It's not just them negotiating directly with Azerbaijan.
I think in regards to some of the negative feedback you got about, in regards to not criticizing the government enough, I think people, again, it's about nuance. People want you to just say, screw this government, or, I'm with this guy, or I'm with that guy.
Again, nothing in the middle.
Nothing in the middle. You actually started criticizing this government before the war.
Mm-hmm.
In our interview, we were talking about the things that we didn't agree with that they were doing, and that was still in when everything was great. That was before the war, and people were still supporting the government. Mm-hmm. And then when the war happened, you were criticizing throughout. You were sharing.
But I also supported throughout, because I think when there's a war, especially when you're being attacked, you need to all support the army and the government to protect the people. Like, there is no choice there. There isn't one country that doesn't do that.
Also, what's really difficult worldwide now is that it's really hard to know what to believe. That's the biggest problem that we have now in Armenia, that we just don't know who to trust anymore.
Mm. It's not just in Armenia.
Yeah.
It's here, it's everywhere, to be honest.
Yeah.
And that is a byproduct of social media and the obfuscation of objective reality. There is still only one truth. It hasn't changed from time immemorial to now. The difference is, it's like the walls behind you. So those walls are diffusers. Something comes at it. What it does is that diffuses the sound and sends it in multiple directions. And that's what social media does with the truth. Mm-hmm. In terms of the war, and even then, if you look at it, 44 days, right? 44 days, this war, based on the balance of power and the hierarchical corruption in a Soviet kind of Russian-infused system within the army, we should have lost within a week. And that's what the Turks were expecting. They expected to take over Artsakh, all of Artsakh, in less than a week. There were 3-4 days. They had Turkey, And at first they failed, so they got Turkish commanders to help. Like, with all our shortcomings, they weren't able to, an incredible, effective military cooperation had to last a month and a half, which is ridiculous. And let's talk about the 3 attempts to try to do a ceasefire at that time, right? The first one was with Putin. Didn't happen because Putin said, don't listen to me. It doesn't matter. I've given you the okay, do what you want, right? Second one was with France. Azeris didn't care. And in each case, I was told by reliable sources that even if Ilham Aliyev was ready to listen, because mind you, this is a small leader of a small country in terms of the world, right? Erdogan egged him on. Erdogan said, keep going, they're not going to stop you, right? And in terms of the US, what was really disappointing as a US taxpayer is Trump was, running for office again? He had this big rally. Armenians came, pushed the issue in front of him at a rally, and he said, oh, I love Armenians. We'll make a deal. We'll make a deal easily. I know all those people. What happened? Mike Pompeo? Nothing. Nothing happened, It was almost relying on those things was actually, detrimental to the war for Armenia, because you have 3 large countries trying to step in and propose a ceasefire. The intentions are important here. Let's get back to intentions. Maybe the French had the right intentions, but I don't believe Russia had the right intentions, because they wouldn't have. If Putin had not given a green light to Azerbaijan and Turkey, there is no fucking way Azerbaijan and Turkey would have attacked Artsakh or Armenia. No fucking way. We know how politics works in the area. All right? They gave the green light. And for that, they lost Armenia forever. It's very tough. It's very tough being at a knife's edge with, you got Azeri soldiers within Armenia proper, occupying territory in Armenia, for example, and they still haven't left, and they're talking about swapping land and doing borders, which is done in one part of the country, but not in others. I've said this many times, and you and I have both listened to many political journalists saying this as well, that the only road to peace for Armenia is to properly arm ourselves for defense, because then they're not going to mess with us. And I think the pivot to the West has helped in terms of putting diplomatic pressure on Baku to stop its, they haven't stopped their rhetoric, but at least stop with further invasions and, all of that. So I think that's being effective in the short term. But in the long term, you want to be a porcupine. You want to have that porcupine defense where it's going to hurt someone to attack you. And that's what we need. And in the long term, you want to be in a position of strength, economically, militarily, so that you're not worried about that. You create peace through being a big guy. No one's going to punch you if you're a giant guy at a bar. If they try, this is their detriment, right? I think that's our only thing, and we are headed toward there, but it's very difficult in the short term. And we need to unite irrespective of our complicity, irrespective of our shortcomings, the shortcomings of our leadership. We need to unite to be able to present a united front against our brutal enemies that have not given us any space.
I'm glad we talked about this because I was frustrated for you, and I was more offended, I think, than you were when you would get some hate. No, I would really took it personally because I've seen firsthand how much you've done for Armenia. I've seen behind the scenes what you do also for Armenia. When people don't know about it, you don't advertise it, and you've done it for almost all of your life. When I was in high school, people did not know what Armenian was. They would ask me, where are you from? And when I would say I'm Armenian, they'd be like, huh, Romanian? What's that? I mean, they just had
Albanian,
no clue.
Romanian.
Yeah, everything but Armenian. I mean, it was just not on the map. And then System of a Down blew up. And suddenly everyone was like, oh, you're Armenian? That's so cool. And it just became the cool thing. And you educated people about Armenia. You educated people about the Armenian Genocide. You worked tirelessly most of your life for Armenia and the Armenian cause, and then to get just cheap attacks, huh?
To be called a traitor after all that.
That's just bullshit.
Yeah, I know
bullshit. It's just such a cheap attack. And
to be honest with you, it's very interesting because I've noticed in life, especially as an activist, even as an artist, and I think Chomsky said this. I've heard it from different places. Maybe it's Howard Zinn. He said, if some people aren't hating you, you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're going to have to, and the 9/11 story in the book is a great example because it's not always that public opinion is aware of the complicity of everything happening at the time. And yet the truth doesn't change. And if you have to speak truth against public opinion at the time or against public notions at the time, you're going to be targeted. And that happened then. It happened in America to me. It's happened with Armenian politics to me. And it's going to happen in the future as well, probably, because, but the truth doesn't change. And over time, the truth materializes. It comes out and you see what really happened, And so that becomes the saving grace.
Serj, this show is called But That 1%, and it was very personal to me because there are a few times in my life that I was told something is absolutely impossible. And I thought to myself, well, is there at least a 1% chance that it could be done? And if there's even just 1%, then it's important enough for me where I will put my all into it and I'll risk it all, but I'm going to fight for it. Have you had that in your life where something just seemed impossible, but you really had to take a massive risk for something you were passionate about?
Every day.
Give me an example.
The way I look at it is if I think something is right, and if I feel something is my vision, I don't even see the encumbrances or the impediments. I don't even see them because I know that that's what I'm supposed to do. When I know what I'm supposed to do, if I'm confused as to what I'm supposed to do, then you start weighing shit, right? You're like, this is that. But when you know exactly what you want to do, when you know what the right thing to do is, when you know what your vision is, you wake up in the morning and you get excited about something because you know you want to do that, I don't even think about the rest, to be honest, because you can always, I mean, you know, there's supposed to be impediments. You know, life is not a paved road. It's rocky.
When did you start having that? When did you start believing in yourself and trusting yourself?
I didn't say I do.
But it takes a certain
it's almost
kind
naive
of courage.
to a point. It's a form of naivete to almost as an artist. Artists are selfish people because we don't create for anyone else. If you're a real artist, you don't create for anyone else. You create for yourself, and you get happy when you create something great, right?
You're looking at my husband.
Yes,
He says that too.
Misha,
Yeah.
he agrees.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I think it's not so much believing in yourself or your vision, but just knowing you got to do this, and you do it, and you do realize you're gonna get some flack, right? That's going to happen. But what's the other option? Not doing what's in your vision? There's only one life. You're going to be dead.
It takes a certain kind of courage and strength to do that. You know how sometimes when people are talking about others, it reveals more about themselves than it does about the other person? Yes. In your memoir, when you're talking about your grandfather and you're talking about how he had smoked for 50-something years in his life, 2 packs a day, and just because your uncle was kind of teasing him about smoking, and he wanted to prove that, no, like, I'll quit. And he just quit cold turkey and never touched another cigarette again. You admired that about him. You admired the strength. And that's a leitmotif throughout your whole book. Anytime that you feel like you've caved under pressure or you didn't show the kind of strength that you wanted, it eats you up. So where does that strength come from? Where does that courage come from? Is it something you're born with? Is it something that you develop over time?
I don't know. But I think, you know, I always tell people, I have friends who are surgeons, neurosurgeons, and incredible people that their daily lives are the difference between life and death for someone. Now that's pressure, you know? So compared to that, I don't have pressure. I'm playing music, I'm doing art, and speaking truths, and some people are going to like it, some people are going to hate it, but you know, honestly, it's not that difficult. You know, their life is difficult.
Okay, fan questions and we're done.
Sure.
Okay, so the cool news is that most of the fan questions that you got on Instagram, most of them are actually answered in your memoir. So
there you go.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to pick the ones that maybe you don't elaborate on as much or weren't there at all. So I thought this was interesting. Don't know how to really pronounce the name. Songer Jando. Could you ask him about that album, which had been written already in the last 19 years? John Dolmayan said in the Avenged Sevenfold podcast called Drinks with Johnny 2 to 3 years ago. That would be great if we'd get some sentences about that session.
The album that was written? I would say there's no album that is written. I would say that the band... So years ago, and this is outlined in the book, but years ago there was a try of coming to minds with myself and the guys in the band. I tried to come to them with what I call as a jokingly a manifesto and saying, listen, if we're going to move forward, let's do things in a more egalitarian fashion. Let's equally split publishing. Let's equally bring in songs, especially the creators, mostly Darren and I, Shavo as well. And everyone gets a veto on songs, like all these amazing kind of, you know, theoretical, positive, you know, egalitarian terms. Apparently it doesn't work in a metal band, you know, the joke is on me, you know. So it didn't work. But at that time, I invited Darren over many times. We had dinner at my house, and I would have him play me music that he had written. And I would make notes about that music and send it to him. And I would send him music I would play him music that I'd written. And so at one point we had a band meeting, a very long one, and we didn't come to terms on stuff, but the guys wanted to work on some of those songs. I was in New Zealand. And so they started working in a rehearsal studio on some of those songs, which included Darren's songs and a few of mine, if I'm not mistaken. Nothing was recorded. And they had sent it to me. I was in New Zealand at the time. They had sent me a recording to listen to. And nothing, like when I say recording, I'm talking about like a tape from a rehearsal studio, not a recording per se. I would say that Genocidal Humanoids was probably one of them, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember if Protect the Land was one of them. I don't remember. Maybe, probably not, I would say. But, some of those, a lot of those are Darren's songs, and some of them he may have released recently. And some of those are my songs, which I released probably on Elasticity. So that's the story. I mean, there is no record.
Okay. Varej is asking, what is his main source of inspiration? Has it changed over the years?
I see something and it comes to me. I'm affected by something as an artist, and then when I'm ready to receive it, it comes to me. And that could be in the form of music, art, poetry, prose, political diatribe, anything. I see something and then it comes to me. And that hasn't changed, really. My skill set's changed over time in different fields. I've gotten to wider forms of art instead of just one. I'm not just writing music to record music and release as an artist or as a band. I'm doing it for film and TV. I'm doing it for my paintings, musical scores, and doing different genres. And so my field has expanded, but it's still that same kind of process early on.
Okay, Todd Gaff is asking, who were Serj's favorite bands to tour with?
Oh, to tour with? Originally, we were touring with a band called Snot. They were friends of ours, and they took us under their wing. They were a Santa Barbara band. And Lynn, their singer, Lynn Strait, died many years ago, and that was really tragic. But we loved touring with them, because we were an LA band, and we hadn't toured outside of LA, and it wasn't like they were a big band either, like they were touring, but they were at least regional, like they toured California, North Coast, San Diego, that kind of stuff. So that I remember as one of my favorite bands to tour with, because they really helped us, and took us under their wing. We've toured with so many bands. We've toured with Tool and Rage Against the Machine and, Chili Peppers and, like so many bands, like on festivals mostly, right? But also some headliners here and there, Deftones and Korn. And I mean, we've made friends across the spectrum. It's hard to pick particular bands because you make friends with a bunch of people, and you enjoy their music. And sometimes you don't enjoy their music, but you enjoy the people. And sometimes you enjoy their music and the people, and it's rare.
But what about when you enjoy the music and then you don't enjoy the people? That sucks.
Then I don't deal with them.
Yeah.
I'll just listen and leave.
But then can you still listen to their music after?
Yeah, I can.
You can.
But that's rare for me. That when I don't like a person, but I like their music is rare for me. It hasn't happened that many times. But in that sense, I'll listen to their music and not see their face. I don't give a shit.
Cool. Serj, thank you so much for coming today.
Sona.
It's always so fun talking to you.
Likewise. Merci.
You have to sign my book before you go.
Yes, of course. Cut.
If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to follow, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Your support helps this channel grow, allowing us to bring you even more engaging and high-quality content. You can also follow us across all social media platforms. Short break to thank Arutunian & Associates, one of today's sponsors. This law firm specializes in working with social media influencers, bloggers, and on-camera talent, helping them navigate partnership contracts with major brands like Google, YouTube, CoverGirl, and Sephora. Their expertise ensures your rights are protected in every deal. Visit arutunianlaw.com to learn more. That's ARUTYUNYANLAW.com. A huge thanks to Torpedo Comics and Essentia Beauty Spa for helping to make this podcast possible. You've probably seen Torpedo Comics in your local malls, but you can also visit them online at torpedocomics.com for an amazing selection of comics and collectibles. As for Essentia Beauty Spa, their beauty experts are truly unparalleled. I trust Diana, the founder, with all of my hair needs. She's simply the best. For more information, visit essentiabeautyspa.com.